Kanye West. The name itself once conjured images of groundbreaking music. He was a visionary artist, a producer who redefined hip-hop. His albums were events, dissected and debated by critics and fans alike. He built a fashion empire, Yeezy, that became a cultural phenomenon. For many years, he was seen as a creative genius, albeit an eccentric one. His confidence was legendary, sometimes bordering on arrogance, but often perceived as part of his artistic persona. This was the Kanye many knew, a figure who pushed boundaries and challenged conventions, often to great acclaim. He was a man who seemed to turn everything he touched into gold, or at least into something everyone was talking about. His journey was a staple of modern celebrity narratives. He rose from a middle-class background to global superstardom. He won Grammy Awards, countless accolades. He married into one of the most famous families in the world. His concerts sold out stadiums. His fashion lines had people queuing for blocks. There were always moments of outlandish behavior, of course. Interrupting Taylor Swift at the VMAs was an early sign of his willingness to court controversy. Yet for a long time, these incidents were often absorbed into the larger-than-life persona, dismissed by some as antics, or even celebrated by others as a refusal to conform to societal expectations. He was, in many ways, a mirror reflecting the excesses and contradictions of fame itself. However, the narrative began to shift, slowly at first, then with alarming speed. The eccentricities seemed to morph into something darker, more troubling. The public pronouncements became less about artistic rebellion and more about genuinely offensive ideologies. What was once seen as provocative began to be viewed as harmful. The artist who once spoke about breaking down barriers started to erect them, alienating vast swathes of his audience and former collaborators. The support he once enjoyed, both commercially and critically, started to erode, replaced by condemnation and concern over his increasingly erratic and offensive statements. This wasn't just another celebrity scandal, it felt like witnessing the public dismantling of a once revered figure. The transformation has been stark and, for many, deeply disappointing. How did a figure so central to popular culture become so widely condemned? This essay will explore the recent chapters of Kanye West's or Ye's public life, focusing on the period from late 2022 into 2025. It will detail the specific comments and actions that led to widespread public backlash. It will examine the termination of lucrative partnerships, the impact on his reputation, and the ongoing discussions surrounding his mental health. This is a story about the high cost of words and the complex interplay between genius, fame, and profound public disapproval in the modern age. The autumn of 2022 marked a significant and deeply troubling turning point for Kanye West. It was in October of that year that he unleashed a series of anti-Semitic statements that sent shockwaves across the globe. These were not veiled remarks or ambiguous comments, they were direct and offensive. He posted messages on social media platforms like Instagram and X, which was then known as Twitter, threatening Jewish people. He declared he was going DEFCON 3 on Jewish people, a disturbing and nonsensical reference to the US military defense readiness condition DEFCON. The backlash was immediate. Social media companies, often criticized for their slow response to hate speech, acted relatively quickly in this instance. His accounts were restricted. He was suspended from both Instagram and Twitter for violating their policies on hate speech. For many public figures, such a swift and decisive rebuke from major platforms might have served as a moment for reflection, perhaps an apology, or at least a period of silence. But for Ye, it seemed to have the opposite effect. Instead of retreating, he appeared to double down on his rhetoric. The initial posts were not isolated incidents, but rather the beginning of a sustained campaign of anti-Semitic commentary that would continue for months, growing more explicit and more disturbing with each new utterance. This was not just a misstep, it was the start of a deliberate and public embrace of hateful ideology. Over the following 2 months, Ye continued to repeat and expand upon his anti-Semitic claims in various interviews and podcast appearances. He seemed to seek out platforms, regardless of their mainstream credibility, that would allow him to voice these views. He spoke of a vast Jewish conspiracy controlling media, finance, and other sectors of society, classic anti-Semitic tropes that have fueled persecution for centuries. Each appearance amplified the controversy, drawing further condemnation from Jewish organizations, civil rights groups, fellow celebrities, and the general public. It was a bewildering spectacle, a globally recognized artist seemingly determined to dismantle his own reputation with an avalanche of ancient hatreds. The comments were not just offensive, they were dangerous. Anti-Semitism was on the rise globally, and Year's words, broadcast to his millions of followers, had the potential to incite real-world harm. Leaders and organizations dedicated to combating anti-Semitism spoke out forcefully, highlighting the irresponsible nature of his platform. The initial shock gave way to a grim realization that this was not a fleeting moment of poor judgment. It was a sustained public expression of deeply prejudiced views, broadcast by a man who still held considerable cultural sway. Despite the growing outrage, the storm had begun, and its destructive path was just starting to become clear. The commercial fallout from Kanye West's anti-Semitic tirade was swift and severe, most notably with the termination of his highly lucrative partnership with Adidas. The German sportswear giant had collaborated with Ye on the Yeezy line of sneakers and apparel since 2013. This partnership was reportedly worth billions, making it one of the most successful and culturally impactful collaborations in fashion history. Yeezy products were phenomenally popular, often selling out within minutes of release and commanding high prices on the resale market. For Adidas, Yeezy represented a significant portion of its revenue and a powerful connection to youth culture. The brand had for a time seemed willing to weather Ye's earlier eccentricities. However, the anti-Semitic comments of October 2022 proved to be a line that Adidas could not ignore. The company faced immense public pressure to sever ties with West. Critics pointed out the hypocrisy of a German company with its own complex history, continuing to profit from a partnership with someone espousing such hateful views. After a period of review, Adidas announced in late October 2022 that it was ending its partnership with Ye immediately. The company stated unequivocally that it does not tolerate anti-Semitism and any other sort of hate speech, describing West's comments and actions as unacceptable, hateful, and dangerous. This decision was a monumental blow to Ye's financial empire. The termination was not a simple affair. Adidas was left with a massive inventory of unsold Yeezy products valued at around 1.2 billion euros. The company grappled with what to do with this stock, initially forecasting significant losses. Eventually, in October 2024, nearly 2 years after the initial split, Adidas announced a settlement with Kanye West. This agreement ended all legal proceedings between the two parties. Interestingly, the settlement reportedly involved no money changing hands directly. Instead, Adidas committed to selling the remaining Yeezy stock, with a significant portion of the proceeds to be donated to various non-governmental organizations, including those fighting discrimination and anti-Semitism, such as Adidas's own Anti-Discrimination Foundation. The final batches of this stock were expected to be sold by the end of 2024. Beyond Adidas, other significant partnerships also unraveled. Fashion house Balenciaga cut ties with Ye. The talent agency CAI dropped him as a client. Gap, which had a much hyped but ultimately troubled partnership with Yeezy, also ended its collaboration. The message from the corporate world was clear. Association with Ye's brand of bigotry was too toxic, too damaging to their own reputations. The man who had once been a Midas figure, turning collaborations into gold, now found himself a pariah in the industries he had once dominated. His words had a tangible, devastating financial cost, dismantling the commercial empire he had so carefully constructed over years of creative and business endeavor. If there was any doubt about the depth of Kanye West's commitment to his offensive new path, his appearance on Alex Jones's Infowars show in December 2022 seemed designed to dispel it. Infowars, a platform notorious for spreading conspiracy theories and far-right rhetoric, provided Ye with an audience receptive to extreme views. During the lengthy and bizarre interview, Ye, often wearing a full face covering, went far beyond his previous anti-Semitic statements. He openly expressed admiration for Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. He stated, "I see good things about Hitler, and I like Hitler." These pronouncements were shocking, even by the standards of Infowars. His comments praising Hitler were met with widespread horror and condemnation. To invoke the architect of the Holocaust in such a positive light was seen as an unforgivable offense, a grotesque insult to the memory of millions of victims. Alex Jones, himself a deeply controversial figure, at times appeared visibly uncomfortable, attempting to push back, however feebly, against Year's most extreme assertions about Hitler. Year also continued to push anti-Semitic tropes, claiming Jewish people controlled financial institutions and media. The appearance was a public relations disaster of epic proportions, solidifying his image as someone who had embraced the darkest of ideologies. It was a moment that many observers felt was a point of no return. This Infowars interview significantly amplified the damage to Year's already battered public image. It wasn't just a celebrity being controversial. It was a celebrity seemingly aligning himself with one of history's most reviled figures. Jewish groups and Holocaust remembrance organizations issued powerful statements, condemning his words, emphasizing the pain and fear such rhetoric caused, especially in a climate of rising anti-Semitism. The interview served as a stark illustration of how far Year had strayed from his earlier persona. He was no longer just an eccentric artist, he was actively promoting views associated with violent hate groups and genocidal regimes. This appearance was a chilling spectacle of self-destruction played out on a notorious stage. The fallout was immediate and widespread. Any remaining defenders, or those who had hoped his earlier comments were a temporary aberration, were faced with undeniable evidence of a deeper, more disturbing shift. The Infowars interview became a key exhibit in the case against Kanye West in the court of public opinion. It cemented the perception that he was not merely making ill-advised statements, but was, in fact, propagating dangerous and deeply offensive beliefs. This was more than just another controversy. It felt like a deliberate plunge into infamy, a conscious decision to associate with the most toxic elements of public discourse, leaving a trail of outrage and disbelief in its wake. Section 5. A persistent pattern controversies continue into 2025. The end of 2022 did not mark the end of Kanye West's controversial behavior. Far from it. The pattern of offensive statements and troubling actions persisted, extending through 2023, 2024, and into the early months of 2025. It became clear that the initial anti-Semitic outbursts were not an isolated episode, but rather part of an ongoing public trajectory. Reports from media outlets like Billboard indicated that Year continued to be embroiled in controversies, particularly for making further anti-Semitic and increasingly anti-LGBTQ statements on various social media platforms and in other public forums. This demonstrated a broadening of his targets, though the core anti-Semitic themes remained a consistent feature of his rhetoric. One particularly egregious example of his continued provocations in the months leading up to May 2025 was his attempt to release a song reportedly titled Heil Hitler. This title alone was designed to cause maximum offense and outrage. Unsurprisingly, the song was allegedly banned by all major digital streaming platforms, preventing its official release. Year reportedly expressed frustration over this ban, seemingly unable or unwilling to comprehend why such a move would be met with universal condemnation. This incident highlighted his continued defiance and his apparent determination to push the boundaries of acceptable discourse, regardless of the consequences or the hurt caused. It showed a profound disconnect from mainstream societal values. This period, leading up to May 2025, was characterized by a steady drumbeat of smaller yet still damaging incidents. His social media presence, when active, remained a source of inflammatory remarks. He seemed to be caught in a cycle of provocation, backlash, and further provocation. Even after the major partnerships had been severed and his public standing had plummeted, he did not appear to moderate his views or his expression of them. This ongoing behavior suggested that the issues at play were deep-seated, not merely a temporary lapse in judgment or a stunt gone wrong. It was as if he was intent on reinforcing his new, deeply negative public persona. The cumulative effect of these ongoing controversies was to further entrench the public's negative perception of him. Each new incident served as another reminder of his embrace of hateful ideologies. It also made any potential path to redemption or reconciliation seem increasingly unlikely. The Kanye West of early 2025 was a figure largely defined by his capacity to offend and his apparent unwillingness to engage in any form of genuine remorse or self-correction. His actions suggested a man isolated in his own worldview, either oblivious to or unconcerned by the widespread condemnation he faced from so many quarters of society. Section 6, Global Stages, Public Meltdowns, Incidents of Early 2025. The controversies surrounding Kanye West were not confined to online pronouncements or obscure podcast appearances. They also manifested in real-world events and media interactions as 2025 unfolded. A significant example of the tangible consequences of his tarnished reputation occurred in May 2025. An upcoming concert, Ye was scheduled to perform at the Incheon Moonhak Main Stadium in South Korea on May 31, 2025, was abruptly cancelled. The organizers cited his recent controversies as the reason for the cancellation, a clear indication that his behavior was having a direct impact on his ability to perform and engage with international audiences. This was a public and global rejection. Earlier in the same month, May 2025, Ye provided another spectacle of erratic behavior during a high-profile media appearance. He was a guest on Piers Morgan's Uncensored show, a platform known for its confrontational interviews. During the exchange, Ye reportedly made several provocative statements. He allegedly compared himself to iconic figures like John Lennon and Michael Jackson, a move that many saw as grandiose and disconnected from his current standing. He also launched into criticisms of the media, a familiar theme for him, but one that now carried the weight of his many recent offensive declarations. The interview became increasingly tense and ultimately ended with Ye storming off the set. This walkout on Piers Morgan's show quickly became another viral moment, further cementing his image as volatile and difficult. For some, it might have been seen as Ye refusing to be challenged, while for others it was another instance of him being unable to handle scrutiny or engage in reasoned discourse. Regardless of interpretation, the incident did little to repair his damaged public image. Instead, it added another layer to the narrative of a celebrity out of control, unable to navigate public interactions without resorting to grandstanding or abrupt departures when faced with questions he found uncomfortable. It was a performance, but not one that garnered applause. These incidents in early 2025, the concert cancellation in South Korea, and the dramatic exit from the Piers Morgan interview demonstrated that the fallout from his earlier anti-Semitic comments and subsequent behavior was ongoing and profound. They showed that his actions had real-world consequences, limiting his professional opportunities and further alienating him from mainstream public life. It painted a picture of an artist increasingly isolated, not by external forces, but by the consequences of his own repeated words and actions. The stage was shrinking, and the media spotlight, when it found him, often illuminated moments of conflict rather than creativity. Section 7. The Court of Public Opinion Reputation in Freefall. The sustained barrage of anti-Semitic comments, the admiration expressed for Adolf Hitler, and the continued controversial rhetoric into 2025 collectively wrought catastrophic damage upon Kanye West's public image. What was once a reputation built on musical innovation and boundary-pushing artistry became overwhelmingly defined by hate speech and erratic behavior. The public backlash was immense and multifaceted. It came from former fans, fellow artists, industry leaders, political figures, and community organizations. Social media, once a tool for his direct communication and promotion, became a primary arena for widespread condemnation of his views. Hashtags calling for him to be cancelled or denouncing his anti-Semitism trended frequently. The damage was not merely about unpopular opinions, it was about the embrace of ideologies that have historically led to violence and persecution. His words were seen as actively harmful, contributing to a climate of intolerance and fear, particularly for Jewish communities. This perception stripped away much of the goodwill he had accumulated over his career. Many who had previously admired his music or fashion found it impossible to separate the art from the artist's deeply offensive pronouncements. Museums and cultural institutions that once celebrated his work began to distance themselves. His legacy, once seemingly assured as a cultural innovator, was now irrevocably tainted. The Infowars appearance in particular was a watershed moment for many. Praising Hitler crossed a line that few public figures have ever dared to approach, let alone leap over with such apparent conviction. This act alone cemented his pariah status in many circles. Even those who might have previously tried to rationalize his behavior as performance art or a cry for help found it increasingly difficult to do so in the face of such explicit and abhorrent statements. The public narrative shifted from Kanye being Kanye to Kanye espousing dangerous hate. This change was profound and likely permanent for a significant portion of the global audience. As of May 2025, his reputation remains in tatters. While he undoubtedly retains a core group of devoted followers, the broader public perception is overwhelmingly negative. The journey from a celebrated cultural icon to a figure widely condemned for anti-Semitism and bigotry has been swift and brutal. It serves as a stark case study in how quickly and completely a public image can be dismantled by one's own words and actions, especially when those words tap into the darkest currents of human prejudice. The court of public opinion had, for the most part, delivered its verdict, and it was resoundingly unfavorable. Section 8. Beneath the Surface: Mental Health and Public Scrutiny. In discussions surrounding Kanye West's dramatic transformation and controversial behavior, his mental health has frequently been a subject of speculation and concern. Ye himself has publicly disclosed that he has been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. He's spoken about his experiences with the condition in interviews and even referenced it in his music. This diagnosis has led many observers to consider the extent to which his mental health challenges might be influencing his erratic statements and actions. It is a complex and sensitive aspect of his public downfall, one that requires careful consideration without resorting to armchair diagnoses or excusing harmful behavior. Bipolar disorder is a serious mental health condition characterized by extreme shifts in mood, energy, activity levels, concentration, and the ability to carry out day-to-day tasks. These shifts can include manic episodes marked by elevated mood, racing thoughts, and impulsivity, and depressive episodes. It is plausible that periods of mania could contribute to grandiose thinking, poor judgment, and impulsive speech, which some might see reflected in Ye's public pronouncements. However, it is crucial to state that having bipolar disorder does not inherently lead to anti-Semitism or hate speech. Many people live with bipolar disorder without espousing such views. The intersection of celebrity, mental illness, and public scrutiny creates a challenging dynamic. While there is a need for empathy and understanding regarding mental health struggles, there is also a responsibility to hold public figures accountable for the impact of their words and actions, especially when they promote hate. Attributing all of Ye's behavior solely to his bipolar disorder risks oversimplifying a complex situation and potentially stigmatizing others with the same condition. It also risks absolving him of personal responsibility for the choices he makes in expressing his views. The discourse often struggles to balance compassion for his potential suffering with condemnation for the harm his statements cause. Ultimately, while Ye's disclosed mental health condition may be a contributing factor to his behavior, it cannot serve as a complete explanation or justification for anti-Semitism and other forms of bigotry. The public is left to grapple with the image of a once brilliant artist whose struggles, whatever their precise nature and interplay, are now inextricably linked with a legacy of deeply offensive and damaging public statements. The conversation around Kanye West thus becomes not only about art and controversy, but also about the difficult questions surrounding mental health in the public eye and the limits of understanding when faced with profound and persistent hate speech. Section 9, Conclusion to A Legacy Redefined by Controversy. The journey of Kanye West, now known as Ye, through the landscape of popular culture has been one of dramatic highs and equally precipitous lows. He ascended to the zenith of musical and cultural influence, hailed as a generational talent, a disruptor and a visionary. His creative output reshaped genres and influenced countless artists. For a significant period, his name was synonymous with innovation and a certain kind of fearless artistic expression. He built an empire not just in music but also in fashion, commanding attention and often adulation on a global scale. This was the Kanye West who once seemed destined for a place among the all-time greats, his legacy secured. However, the period from October 2022 onwards has seen a catastrophic unraveling of that carefully constructed public image. His repeated anti-Semitic comments, his admiration for Adolf Hitler, and his continued embrace of controversial and offensive rhetoric into 2025 have fundamentally redefined how he is perceived. The artist who once broke down barriers is now seen by many as someone who actively promotes division and hate. The partnerships that once underscored his commercial power have been terminated, and his mainstream acceptability has plummeted. The public narrative is no longer primarily about his artistic achievements, but about his descent into bigotry and public infamy. The reasons for this transformation are undoubtedly complex, with his acknowledged struggles with bipolar disorder often cited as a potential contributing factor. Yet, the public harm caused by his words cannot be easily dismissed or excused. The saga of Kanye West has become a cautionary tale about the responsibilities that come with immense fame and influence, and the devastating consequences of using that platform to propagate hate. It highlights the fragility of reputation in an age of instant global communication, and the challenges of navigating public figures who exhibit both undeniable talent and deeply problematic behavior. It has forced uncomfortable conversations about art, the artist, and the lines society draws. As of May 2025, Kanye West remains a profoundly controversial figure. His recent sighting in Mallorca, with his wife Bianca Censori and streamers Sneeko and Digital Nas, doing little to change the overarching narrative. His legacy is now a fractured one, forever marked by this period of intense negativity. While his earlier musical contributions will likely endure, they will always be viewed through the lens of his subsequent fall from grace. The transformation from celebrated icon to widely condemned provocateur has been stunning in its speed and scope, offering a somber reflection on the complexities of genius, the corrosive nature of hate, and the enduring power of public accountability. His journey serves as a stark reminder that no amount of past success can fully insulate a public figure from the consequences of their present actions.